Watching replays and using takeover is cool and all, but sometimes you want to practice situations that you may not have encountered in actual matches, and that's where training mode and other practice related features come in. I've mentioned before that there is a lot of friction to using the lab effectively, or at least enough friction to put people off from getting the most out of it. Although training mode in fighting games is almost as old as the genre itself, it's surprising how much disparity varies between games and how late some quality of life features started showing up. That's what we'll be looking at in part 3 of this QOL series. As usual, I'm presenting features that only exist in some games and which I think deserve wider adoption. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. A common trap training mode users fall into, and that includes me, is that they are almost exclusively using it to practice things that don't require interacting with your opponent, things like movement tech or combos. But usually you don't die because you dropped a combo, at least not directly. You die because you failed to prevent your opponent from starting theirs. It's just that non-interactive stuff takes less work to set up, so people are more likely to go for that. SF6 has training mode presets for practicing things that aren't combos, Granblue has counterplay tutorials, Tekken has punishment training and throw escape training, Uni 2 has reactions training, which are all really nice, but people are likely to outgrow or get bored of these fairly quickly. Strive has the combo search feature, which lets people create not only custom combo trials, but also what they call set play, which is essentially pressure sequences, okizeme, reversal safe strings, etc., which is one step up from basic combo practice, as it now includes some reaction from the opponent. That's one great use of user-generated content, but the game does not push it nearly enough, the UI is a bit clunky, and it's questionable how good the recommendation engine is. But we're here to list good ideas, and that's one of them. So hopefully we'll see some games try to improve on the execution. By the way, all these modes are much more likely to see use if they're easy to switch back and forth, like say in Granblue, and don't kick you out of the queue, for instance like Tekken, where going into punishment training poses matchmaking. Let's go back to standard training mode. The first point of friction with the lab is the boilerplate, getting it in the state you need to practice whatever it is you want to practice. For instance, if you're trying to learn a corner or wall combo, you don't really want to have to push your opponent all the way to the edge of the stage before you can start labbing. Shortcuts that let you reset at various spots on the stage are pretty much standard now, but ArcSys games stand out by giving you spacing options on reset, while Tekken 8 lets you warp to a truly infinite stage. Besides starting positions, there might be some other initial conditions you might want to set up, for instance, forcing counter hit or having certain resources at the ready. Pretty much every modern game lets you do that, down to how much health and other resources each player has. ArcSys games again get a special mention for being more granular about how you set your resources, while SF6 gets bonus points for letting you define how quickly resources refill or whether they even deplete in the first place. Another thing people use training mode for is to gather information about a character, especially a newly released one or one they're considering picking up. And look, just like everyone else, I think it'd be great if we could lab against DLC characters we haven't purchased, but holding my breath waiting for it to happen is not how I want to die. The next best thing is what SF6 is doing with the rental fighter system, where they regularly hand out items that let you use a character you don't own for a limited period of time so you can check them out. Command lists are an obvious way to share character information, but it's extra nice when they give you more information about the moves, its strengths and weaknesses, where Granblue and DNF will for instance tell you whether a special move is air blockable, invulnerable, or will hit grounded opponents. And the little video showing the move in action is the cherry on top. DNF Duel and Under Night both get an additional honorable mention for being the only games I know of which will tell you anything about a character's normals, but that's buried in the tutorial for the former and in the combo trials for the latter. Tekken 8, an NRS game, will let you pin the moves to the center of the screen so you can have the inputs on display while you're practicing. For games where a move is actually a string of attack buttons, as you often find in 3D games, Dead or Alive 5 had an interesting Move Explorer feature where you can just press a button and the game will display the potential follow-ups. But beyond all this, people will likely want to dig deeper. At this point, basic frame data is pretty much universal, although I thought I wouldn't need to mention that the game should tell you whether a move is a low, mid, high or overhead, but Strive still doesn't, at least not outside the command list. I know there are ways you can tell with the training dummy, but the topic du jour is quality of life, and having hit property displayed on screen is kinda nicer, Tekken 8 being very comprehensive about it. Some games go the extra mile, such as SF6, giving you indication that a move is cancelable, and give you the ability to see how long that cancel window is. Tekken 7 had an option to highlight the recovery period of an animation, although they seem to have dropped that in 8, but we know that the better way to show this is the SF6 style frame meter, which thankfully looks like it might become standard as most 2D games released after Street Fighter 6 do feature it. Granblue has a display option that will color a character depending on whether a move is plus, safe or punishable, which is a nice addition for immediate feedback. Another overlooked piece of info in training is once again hit and hurt boxes. Knowing the actual range of a move is useful, to say the least, and knowing that a move is disjointed, meaning the hitbox extends beyond the hurt box, can completely change the perception of its utility. Likewise with moves that provide some sort of invincibility via shrinking and or shifting of hurt boxes. Now, let's say you're trying to practice your bread and butter combo. Some combos have long sequences and sometimes the bit you struggle with is near the end. Of course, at the end of the day you'll have to be able to do the whole thing consistently, so it doesn't hurt to get more practice doing the bit you already know how to do, but it's not always very efficient, especially if the part after your sticking point turns out to be fairly easy. That's why it's nice when the game lets you save the game state at any point and restart from there so you can focus on the part you're interested in. Granted, it takes some skill to save at the right spot and not having fuck up your combo, but it's still a very important feature. That's also why SF6, for instance, lets you define custom shortcut for training mode specific features such as this one. An alternative to this is being able to run the game in slow motion, so you can gradually build up the muscle memory for a string, with Skullgirls and TFH giving you the most granularity on playback speed. Once you're comfortable with combos, you might want to try different ones and see which one is the most damaging, the optimal one. Nearly all games will record and display the highest combo damage you did, but for some reason, most games will require you to leave training mode and come back in order to reset it, while SF6 just gives you a menu option to reset the counter. It's that simple, huh? Sometimes you run your combo in a match and it seems to drop as your opponent is apparently able to start blocking halfway through, and so you go to the lab to investigate. You can spot the issue by noticing the combo counter actually reset halfway through the combo. Or better yet, you can set the dummy to block after the first hit, and that will tell you if your string is true or not. But as we talked about previously, if the game has a frame meter, it will be so much easier to see that your links aren't tight enough, and even by how much. Speaking of the training dummy, let's finish up our exploration with what we can do here. As I mentioned before, if you want to make the most out of training mode, the dummy needs to be a training partner, not a punching bag. Pretty much all training modes lets you set the current state of the dummy, whether they are crouching, standing, jumping, blocking or not, etc. Street Fighter 6 shine in that area by giving you the ability to set shortcuts to toggle some of these, so you don't have to go to a menu to tell the dummy to start or stop blocking. Where it gets interesting is when you specify what happens after an attack connects. When setting the block to random, being able to set the probability of it happening is a nice to have, like in Uni 2, which actually also lets you do that for anything that can be set to random, not just blocking. If we're practicing frame traps, Oki, or reversal safe setups, we're gonna need the dummy to respond to our attack. Sometimes you want to test a string that has a gap in the middle, and you want to simulate an opponent who is respecting your plus frames. So you need the dummy to not mash in that gap. That's why games like SF6 or Tekken 8 will let you specify the number of attacks the dummy will take before they respond, which is much more flexible. Otherwise, most games let you set the dummy to respond on reversal, where reversal here is used in its technical definition, i.e. on the first possible frame after an interaction. But I prefer something like Street Fighter better when you can assign different responses depending on whether it's a hit, block, or wake up. ArcSys games go one step further and let you set responses on throw tech, but also when you reset positions, which is useful for defense drills. In my opinion, the most comprehensive game on that front is Granblue. Not only will it let you pick a response either from the move list or from a recording slot, but it will also let you delay that response by a specific amount with an optional random offset of your choice. This is useful for making the dummy response a little less robotic. It will also let you turn off the response entirely without needing to undo your setup. SF6 doesn't have the random delay offset, but it does have more slots and lets you switch them on or off individually. Sometimes though, the move list isn't cutting it and you need to record the opponent's response. Recording is a standard feature, but shortcuts for recording and playback, like in SF6 and ArcSys games, make the feature so much more usable than having to navigate menus in order to start your recording. In cases where it can matter, like in Tekken, it's nice to have the ability to set what your character is doing while you're recording the dummy's moves, for instance whether they should block or not. When you're setting up responses to your offense, you might need to record actions out of block stun or on wake up. When doing the former in Tekken, you're made to block an attack before the recording starts, so it's easier to time your moves. SF5 did that as well, but also had a similar setup to record move out of Wake Up, with an optional slowdown to once again get the timing down more easily. That's no longer an option in SF6, unfortunately. But more generally, having a bit of time to get ready before the recording starts is nice, by either having a little timer like in Strive, or by only starting the recording on input like in SF or Uni. I think both methods have their place. Once you've made your recordings, you'll want to play them somehow. Beside the aforementioned playback shortcut, Uni 2 and Tekken 8, in its defense training mode, will give you the option to let the recording loop continuously, with an additional pause in the latter, which can be useful if you're trying to drill something. And if you're drilling, you're probably going to have several recordings set up, in which case you'll want to have them play randomly, and it's nice when games let you set the ratio at which each of these will come out. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, having to set things up is a big friction point using the lab, and we've just seen that can involve quite a lot of things. Thankfully, someone at Arxis must be a lab monster and decided they're not dealing with that shit every time they launch the game. So Granblue and Strive will actually remember dummy character settings for each opponent, and Strive will even let you save a list of recordings, give it a name and recall it later. At this point, I should probably mention that all this QOL is QOL for power users, but I bet that there are a fair few people in other competitive genres that would kill to get that level of detail in their training tools. As usual, do let us know in the comments if there's any cool features I've missed, and feel free to share any new idea that no game has implemented yet. I'll see you next week for the last part in this series where I'll look at QOL for offline play, especially in tournaments.